The reason you couldn't focus today has nothing to do with willpower. Your brain was literally designed to shut you out at certain hours, and almost nobody knows it. Right now, millions of Americans are forcing themselves through their most important tasks at the exact worst time of day, and they have no idea they're doing it. Brain damage doesn't happen all at once. It happens slowly, invisibly, one misaligned hour at a time, day after day, week after week, until one morning you wake up and realize you can't even read a single page of a book without reaching for your phone. You've been working hard. You've been trying. So why are you still exhausted? Why does your output never match your effort? Today, neuroscience has the answer, and it's going to change the way you structure every single day from this point forward. Your brain has a golden window. If you miss it, no amount of caffeine, discipline, or motivational podcasts will save you. You'll just be pounding on a locked door, wondering why nothing opens. But if you learn to work with your brain's natural rhythm instead of against it, you'll accomplish more in 4 focused hours than most people do in 12 grinding ones. That's not an exaggeration. That's what the research consistently shows. So let's get into the science, break down every hour of your day, and rebuild your schedule from the ground up based on how your brain actually works. The ability we casually call focus is controlled by a specific region of the brain called the prefrontal cortex. This is the command center for everything that makes you functional as a human being: planning, logical thinking, impulse control, decision-making, emotional regulation. When your prefrontal cortex is firing on all cylinders, you feel sharp. You feel like yourself. You make good decisions, you resist distractions, and complex problems feel solvable. But here's the thing most people never learn. Your prefrontal cortex does not operate at the same level throughout the day. It fluctuates dramatically, according to your body's internal clock, known as the circadian rhythm. This isn't some vague wellness concept. The 2017 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine was awarded to Jeffrey Hall, Michael Rosbash, and Michael Young specifically for their discoveries about the molecular mechanisms controlling circadian rhythms. Their research proved that this internal clock is directly wired into your cognitive function. Your brain follows a predetermined schedule every single day, whether you're aware of it or not, whether you respect it or not. The difference between someone who works with this rhythm and someone who fights against it is the difference between effortless productivity and chronic exhaustion. It's the difference between feeling like a genius at work and feeling like you're wading through concrete. And the most frustrating part is that the people who seem naturally productive aren't smarter or more disciplined than you. They've just accidentally or intentionally aligned their hardest tasks with their brain's peak windows. Once you understand what those windows are, everything changes. Let's start with the most valuable hours of your entire day, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. During this window, your prefrontal cortex reaches its highest activation level. Cortisol, often misunderstood as purely a stress hormone, peaks in the early morning, and at healthy levels, it's actually your brain's natural alertness chemical. Combined with rising body temperature and optimized neurotransmitter levels, this creates a 2-hour window where your capacity for logical reasoning, complex analysis, strategic planning, and deep problem-solving hits its absolute maximum. Research from Harvard Medical School has confirmed that complex problem-solving performance peaks during this mid-morning window compared to any other time of day. Studies analyzing the performance of chess players found that the quality of moves made during mid-morning hours was consistently and measurably superior to moves made at other times. The implications are enormous. This means the most difficult, most important, most cognitively demanding task on your plate should be the very first thing you tackle when you sit down at your desk. Not the second thing. Not after you've warmed up. The first thing. And yet, what do most Americans do during this golden window? They check email. They scroll through Instagram. They sit in status meetings that could have been a Slack message. They answer texts. They browse Reddit. They do the cognitive equivalent of using a surgical laser to open a bag of chips. Every morning, millions of people burn through the most powerful 2 hours their brain will offer them on tasks that require virtually zero prefrontal engagement. Then, at 2 p.m., when their brain is running on fumes, they finally try to sit down and do the hard work, and they wonder why it feels impossible. This is not a willpower problem. This is a scheduling problem. Starting tomorrow, take whatever task you've been procrastinating on, whatever project feels overwhelming, whatever problem requires your sharpest thinking, and put it at 9 a.m. Protect that window like your career depends on it, because in a very real neurological sense it does. Don't open your email. Don't check the news. Don't look at your phone. Sit down and do the hard thing first, while your brain is literally built to handle it. This single change, just moving your most important work to the right time slot, can transform your daily output without requiring you to work a single extra minute. The hour before that peak window, roughly 8 to 9 a.m., is also strategically valuable, though in a different way. During your morning commute or your pre-work routine, your brain is warming up. It's transitioning from sleep mode to full engagement. If you use this time to lightly think about what you need to accomplish that day, not in a stressed, anxious, list-making way, but in a relaxed, almost daydreaming way, you're essentially giving your brain a head start. You're priming the neural networks you'll need. By the time you sit down at your desk, your brain has already started organizing around those problems. You'll drop into focused work faster and with less friction. Listening to a podcast or audiobook related to your work during your commute serves the same function. You're not studying. You're warming the engine. You're allowing your brain to marinate in the relevant material so that when you need to engage deeply, the pathways are already partially activated. People who do this consistently report that work feels easier to start, that they experience less resistance, and that they reach a state of deep focus more quickly. It's a small habit with outsized returns. Now let's talk about the danger zone. From roughly 12 p.m. to 2 p.m., your brain enters a natural trough. Your core body temperature dips slightly, blood flow redirects toward your digestive system, and the prefrontal cortex's activity drops measurably. This is the post-lunch dip, and it's not caused by eating too much pasta. It's hardwired into your biology. Every human being on Earth, regardless of diet, experiences some version of this afternoon slump. The data here is sobering. Traffic accident statistics consistently show that the early afternoon, around 2 p.m., is the second most dangerous time to be on the road, right behind the late-night hours. This isn't coincidence. It's your brain entering a low-power state. And if operating a vehicle becomes measurably more dangerous during this window, imagine what happens to your judgment in a boardroom or your accuracy on a spreadsheet. A landmark study analyzing parole board decisions found that judges granted parole at significantly lower rates during the early afternoon compared to the morning. When their brains were fatigued, they defaulted to the easier, safer decision, which was to deny parole. They weren't being harsher on purpose. Their brains were simply conserving energy by avoiding the cognitive load of a complex, nuanced decision. The lesson is clear. Do not make important decisions between noon and 2 p.m. if you can avoid it. Don't review contracts. Don't negotiate deals. Don't have difficult conversations with your spouse. Instead, fill this window with low-stakes, repetitive tasks, answering routine emails, organizing files, updating spreadsheets, scheduling appointments. These tasks don't require much prefrontal engagement, and they still need to get done. Matching them to your brain's low-power window means you're not wasting peak cognition on busy work, and you're not forcing complex analysis through a sluggish brain. But then something remarkable happens. Between 2 p.m. and 4 p.m., your brain shifts into a completely different mode. As the prefrontal cortex's tight grip loosens, a network called the default mode network, the DMN, begins to activate. The DMN is the brain's creativity engine. It lights up when you're daydreaming, when your mind wanders, when you're not trying to focus on anything specific. And research has shown that this seemingly idle state is actually one of the brain's most productive modes. A team at MIT discovered that when the default mode network is active, the brain begins connecting pieces of information that don't obviously belong together. It pulls from distant memory stores, links unrelated concepts, and generates the kind of novel associations that we experience as creative breakthroughs. This is why you get your best ideas in the shower or on a long drive. Your prefrontal cortex has stepped back, and the DMN has stepped forward. If your work involves any form of creative thinking, brainstorming, writing, design, strategy, problem solving that requires a fresh perspective, this is the window to schedule it. Don't fight the afternoon looseness. Lean into it. Hold a brainstorming session. Sketch out new ideas. Work on that creative project you've been putting off. You don't have to force creativity. During this window, your brain is literally wired to produce it. The rhythm of the day, when you understand it, is elegant. Use the morning for analytical precision. Use the early afternoon for routine maintenance. Use the late afternoon for creative exploration. You're not fighting your brain anymore, you're dancing with it. The evening hours between 9 p.m. and 11 p.m. bring another shift. As the prefrontal cortex continues to wind down for the night, the emotional centers of the brain, particularly the limbic system, become relatively more dominant. Logical processing weakens while emotional sensitivity heightens. This is why nighttime feels different. The world seems more intense, more meaningful, more melancholy. For creative work that draws on emotion, journaling, writing fiction, painting, composing music, this can be a powerful window. Many of history's greatest artists have intuitively gravitated toward nighttime creative sessions, and the neuroscience explains why. When the logical brain quiets, the emotional brain speaks more freely, and art often flows from that place. However, and this is critical, this same neurological shift makes the evening hours dangerous for interpersonal communication and decision-making. When your emotional brain is in the driver's seat and your logical brain is riding in the back, you are far more likely to send a text you'll regret, pick a fight over something trivial, or make a commitment you wouldn't make at 10 a.m. Data from social media platforms consistently shows that impulsive posts made after 10 p.m. are deleted the following morning at significantly higher rates than posts made during the day. The neuroscience makes this obvious. You weren't thinking clearly, your prefrontal cortex was checking out for the night. Everyone has experienced the particular regret of a late-night message sent in an emotional state that looks completely different by the light of morning. That's not a character flaw. That's brain chemistry. The practical rule is simple. Create at night if you want. Journal at night. Write at night. But do not make decisions at night. Do not send important emails at night. Do not have serious relationship conversations at night. If something feels urgent at 10 p.m., write it down and revisit it at 9 a.m. If it still feels urgent in the morning, it probably is. If it doesn't, your prefrontal cortex just saved you from your limbic system. After 11 p.m. through roughly 2 o'clock or 3 a.m., your brain enters its most vulnerable state of the entire day. The prefrontal cortex is nearly offline. Impulse control, rational thinking, long-term planning, all of these faculties are operating at their absolute minimum. Decisions made during these hours aren't really decisions at all. They're impulses wearing the costume of choices. This is when people impulse buy things they don't need at 1 a.m. on Amazon. This is when someone fires off an angry email to their boss that they would never have written at noon. This is when breakups happen over text that both parties will regret by sunrise. And the marketing industry knows this intimately. Multiple studies have shown that late-night advertising generates disproportionately high conversion rates, particularly for impulse purchases and subscription services. Advertisers aren't targeting your wallet at 2 a.m. They're targeting your defenseless prefrontal cortex. You feel like you're making a free choice, but you're making it in the neurological equivalent of a blackout. Your brain's defenses are at their lowest point, and every notification, every targeted ad, every provocative headline is engineered to exploit exactly that. The rule for these hours is absolute. Make no decisions. Buy nothing. Send nothing. If you're awake during these hours, let it be for rest, for light entertainment, for winding down. Nothing more. Anything that feels important can wait until morning, when your brain is actually equipped to evaluate it. The first 30 minutes after waking up are equally treacherous, though for different reasons. Sleep inertia, the groggy, disoriented state that lingers after your alarm goes off, means your brain is caught between sleep and wakefulness. Your brainwaves are a mix of gamma and theta waves, which essentially means you're half dreaming while technically awake. During this window, don't answer important phone calls. Don't respond to your boss's email. Don't agree to anything. Your judgment is genuinely compromised. But here's the fascinating flip side. This half-dreaming state can be creatively useful. Because the logical prefrontal cortex hasn't fully powered up yet, the associative, imaginative parts of your brain still have free rein. Many of history's most celebrated inventors and thinkers captured their greatest ideas in the moments just after waking. Thomas Edison famously exploited this state on purpose. He would sit in a chair holding steel balls in his hands, allowing himself to drift towards sleep. The moment he crossed the threshold into unconsciousness, the balls would drop, the clatter would wake him, and he'd immediately write down whatever ideas had surfaced in that liminal state. Salvador Dali used the same technique. If you keep a notebook on your nightstand and jot down whatever's in your head the moment you wake, you may be surprised by what surfaces. Those half-formed thoughts, those strange connections, they come from a place your fully awake brain can't easily access. So how do you properly wake your brain up and transition out of sleep inertia into a state of sharp, productive alertness? The single most effective method, backed by extensive neuroscience research, is morning sunlight exposure within 30 minutes of waking. When bright light, particularly the blue spectrum light abundant in natural sunlight, hits your retina, it triggers a cascade of neurochemical events. Melatonin production, which keeps you drowsy, shuts down. Cortisol production ramps up to healthy alertness levels. Your internal clock receives its daily calibration signal, which doesn't just wake you up now. It programs your body for better sleep tonight. Dr. Andrew Huberman, a neuroscience professor at Stanford, has extensively documented how morning light exposure is arguably the single most important daily habit for optimizing both daytime alertness and nighttime sleep quality. The mechanism is elegant. Your circadian clock needs a daily anchor point, and morning light provides it. Without that anchor, your entire daily rhythm drifts, leading to worse focus during the day and worse sleep at night. A vicious cycle that compounds over weeks and months. You don't need a fancy light therapy device. Just open your curtains wide. Better yet, step outside for 5 to 10 minutes. Even on an overcast day, outdoor light is orders of magnitude brighter than indoor lighting. Pair this with a glass of warm water and a few minutes of gentle stretching to get your blood circulating, and you've created a morning activation sequence that costs nothing, takes less than 15 minutes, and fundamentally changes the quality of your entire day. This routine sounds almost insultingly simple, but the research behind it is robust and the effects are dramatic. People who adopt this habit consistently report that their morning focus sharpens, their afternoon energy stabilizes, and their evening sleep improves, all from one small change at the start of the day. How you spend your first 30 minutes programs the next 16 hours. Treat those minutes with the respect they deserve. Now there's a critical misconception about focus that needs to be dismantled because it's holding millions of people back. Most Americans believe that focus is an innate trait, that some people are just born with better concentration, the same way some people are born taller. This belief is comforting because it absolves you of responsibility, but it's neurologically wrong. The brain operates on a principle called neuroplasticity, which means it physically restructures itself based on how you use it. The prefrontal cortex, like every other brain region, strengthens with use and atrophies with neglect. It works exactly like a muscle. If you stop going to the gym, your muscles shrink. If you stop challenging your prefrontal cortex with sustained, effortful concentration, it weakens. And here's the alarming part. Our modern lifestyle is systematically weakening this brain region at an unprecedented rate, and most people don't even notice it's happening until the damage is significant. Short-form video, social media algorithms, push notifications, infinite scroll feeds, every one of these technologies is specifically engineered to capture and hold your attention without requiring any effort from your prefrontal cortex. The algorithm does the work. It serves you exactly what your dopamine system craves, in exactly the right dose at exactly the right interval so that you never have to actually concentrate on anything. Your brain is being entertained, but your prefrontal cortex is unemployed. And an unemployed prefrontal cortex is a shrinking prefrontal cortex. Research has found that adults who use their smartphones for more than 5 hours per day show measurably reduced neural density in prefrontal cortex-associated networks compared to lighter users. The rise in adult ADHD diagnoses over the past decade tracks closely with the explosion of smartphone and social media usage, and researchers are increasingly pointing to this connection. It's not that these people's brains are broken. It's that the prefrontal cortex has been allowed to weaken through disuse, the same way muscles atrophy in an astronaut during months of weightlessness. The environment changed and the brain adapted to the new environment. Unfortunately, it adapted in the wrong direction. But here's the empowering truth embedded in that same science. If the prefrontal cortex weakens through disuse, it strengthens through use. Neuroplasticity works in both directions. You can rebuild what's been lost. You can start today, and your brain will begin responding almost immediately. The method is simple, though not easy. You strengthen your prefrontal cortex by deliberately focusing on things that are difficult to focus on. Reading a challenging book when your brain screams to switch to your phone. Working through a complex problem when every impulse tells you to quit. Sitting with a difficult idea instead of fleeing to a distraction. Each time you do this, you're performing the neurological equivalent of a rep at the gym. You're forcing your prefrontal cortex to engage, to sustain, to push through resistance. It's uncomfortable. It's supposed to be uncomfortable. The discomfort is the signal that growth is happening. You wouldn't expect a bicep curl to feel pleasant. You'd expect it to burn. The same principle applies to cognitive training. The burn of sustained focus is your prefrontal cortex getting stronger. However, and this is where most self-improvement advice goes wrong, the state in which you practice this matters enormously. If you're trying to focus while anxious, stressed, or emotionally agitated, you're actually making things worse, not better. When you're in a state of fear or anxiety, your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, activates powerfully, and one of its effects is to actively suppress the prefrontal cortex. This is an evolutionary survival mechanism. When a predator is chasing you, you don't need to think carefully and plan strategically. You need to react instantly. So the brain shuts down higher reasoning and hands control to faster, more primitive systems. The problem is that your amygdala can't tell the difference between a lion charging at you and the anxiety of a looming work deadline. The neurochemical response is the same. And when it kicks in, your prefrontal cortex gets locked out. Everyone has experienced this. You study for weeks for an exam, you know the material cold, and then you sit down in the testing room, your heart starts pounding, your palms start sweating, and suddenly your mind goes blank. You can't remember anything. That's your amygdala hijacking your prefrontal cortex in real time. The knowledge is still in there, you just can't access it because the door has been slammed shut by your own stress response. This is why the concept of relaxed focus is so critical. When your body is calm, when your parasympathetic nervous system is engaged, when you're breathing slowly and deeply, when your muscles aren't tense, your prefrontal cortex operates at maximum efficiency. In terms of brain waves, this corresponds to an alpha wave state. High beta waves indicate stress and tension, and excessive beta activity actually degrades focus. Alpha waves indicate calm alertness. The body is at ease while the mind is engaged. This is the sweet spot. Research on experienced meditators consistently shows that they maintain alpha wave states while performing cognitive tasks, and their accuracy significantly exceeds that of non-meditators performing the same tasks. They're calmer and more accurate at the same time. Relaxation and focus aren't opposites, they're synergistic. The highest performers across every domain, from elite athletes to top surgeons to master chess players, share this quality. They appear calm, almost serene, even under enormous pressure. They've learned, whether consciously or intuitively, that tension destroys the very cognitive machinery they need most. The practical application is straightforward. Before you begin your deep work session, take 60 seconds to breathe slowly and deliberately. Relax your shoulders. Unclench your jaw. Let the urgency dissipate. Then engage with the task from a place of calm curiosity rather than anxious obligation. The quality of your work will be measurably better, and you'll be able to sustain it for longer. When you maintain this state of relaxed focus for a sustained period, something extraordinary happens. You cross a threshold into what psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, who spent his career at the University of Chicago studying this phenomenon, called flow. Flow is different from ordinary focus. Ordinary focus requires conscious effort. Your prefrontal cortex is actively directing your attention, saying, "Stay here, don't wander." Flow is what happens when that effort has been sustained long enough that the process becomes automatic. Your unconscious mind joins the effort. Long-term memory activates spontaneously, feeding relevant information into your working consciousness without you having to search for it. Time distorts. Self-consciousness evaporates. Performance skyrockets. In flow, you're not pushing yourself to work. Work is pulling you forward. It's the state where 3 hours feel like 30 minutes, where solutions appear before you've finished formulating the question, where the gap between thinking and doing dissolves completely. You cannot force yourself into flow. It doesn't respond to willpower or deadlines or caffeine. It arrives on its own, but only when the conditions are right, and those conditions are exactly what we've been discussing. You need to be working on a task that's challenging enough to require your full engagement, but not so overwhelming that it triggers anxiety. You need to be in a state of relaxed alertness. And you need uninterrupted time, typically at least 20 to 30 minutes of sustained focus before flow becomes possible. Every notification that pulls you out resets the clock. Every time you check your phone, you're not just losing those 15 seconds, you're destroying the 20 minutes of buildup that were bringing you to the threshold of flow. This is why protecting your peak hours from distractions isn't just a nice productivity tip. It's the essential prerequisite for accessing your brain's highest performance state. Short naps are another weapon that most Americans dramatically underutilize, largely because American work culture has historically treated daytime sleep as a sign of laziness. The science tells a completely different story. A brief nap, technically called a power nap, lasting between 10 and 20 minutes, allows your brain to clear accumulated adenosine, consolidate short-term memories, and reset the prefrontal cortex. It's like rebooting a computer that's been running too many programs. NASA conducted a landmark study on their pilots and found that a 26-minute nap improved alertness by 54% and overall performance by 34%. Those aren't marginal gains, those are transformative improvements, achieved by simply closing your eyes for less than half an hour. Companies like Google, Nike, and Ben & Jerry's have installed dedicated nap rooms in their offices, not as employee perks but as productivity investments. They've done the math. A brief midday nap generates more output in the afternoon than powering through on caffeine and willpower ever could. The optimal timing aligns perfectly with the post-lunch trough we discussed earlier. Between noon and 2 p.m., when your brain naturally wants to slow down anyway, a 15 to 20-minute nap works with your biology instead of against it. If you can't actually fall asleep, that's fine. Simply closing your eyes and resting in a quiet, dimly lit space for 10 minutes provides substantial cognitive recovery. The goal isn't sleep per se, it's neural deactivation. Even without crossing into sleep, your prefrontal cortex gets a chance to rest and your short-term memory buffers begin to clear. Meditation operates on the same principle and is perhaps even more accessible during a workday. You don't need a cushion, an app, or 30 minutes. 1 to 3 minutes of closing your eyes and focusing solely on your breathing. Feeling the air enter and leave, counting breaths if it helps, gently returning your attention when it wanders, produces measurable neurological effects. Research shows that a landmark study from Harvard Medical School found that participants who practiced mindfulness meditation for just 8 weeks showed measurable increases in gray matter density in their prefrontal cortex on brain scans. Their brains physically changed, more neural tissue, more connections, more capacity, from a practice that required no equipment, no gym membership, and no special skills. You can do this in a bathroom stall at work. You can do it at your desk with your eyes closed for 60 seconds between meetings. You can do it in your parked car before walking into the office. The barrier to entry is essentially zero, and the neurological returns are substantial and cumulative. Exercise deserves its own emphasis because it's arguably the single most powerful intervention available for strengthening the prefrontal cortex. When you engage in aerobic exercise at moderate intensity, enough to elevate your heart rate and produce sweat, for 30 minutes or more, your brain releases a protein called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. BDNF is essentially fertilizer for your brain. It strengthens existing neural connections, promotes the growth of new synapses, and supports the survival of neurons in the prefrontal cortex and hippocampus. Dr. John Ratey, a clinical professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, has described exercise as producing effects on focus and memory that rival prescription medication, without the side effects, without the cost, and without the dependency risk. Controlled experiments consistently show that post-exercise performance on memory and attention tests improves by 20% or more compared to pre-exercise baselines. Running is excellent, but it's not the only option. Even walking, simple, low-impact walking, generates significant cognitive benefits. Walking has a unique advantage that running doesn't. Because the physical demand is low, your brain can simultaneously engage in thought. Walking doesn't just deliver blood and oxygen to the brain. It reduces rumination, loosens rigid thinking patterns, and creates the conditions for insight. This is why so many of history's greatest thinkers were obsessive walkers. Immanuel Kant walked the same route at the same time every single day with such precision that his neighbors reportedly set their clocks by his passing. Aristotle taught his students while walking, giving rise to the peripatetic school of philosophy. Charles Darwin had a dedicated thinking path he called the sandwalk and circled it daily while working through his theories. Steve Jobs was famous for his walking meetings. These weren't coincidences or eccentricities. These were brains intuitively seeking the conditions under which they functioned best. Finally, we need to confront the dopamine trap, because it's silently sabotaging millions of people who don't even know they've fallen into it. When you watch YouTube, play video games, scroll social media, or drink alcohol, the pleasure you experience comes from dopamine released in a brain structure called the nucleus accumbens. This is your brain's instant reward circuit. It delivers quick pleasure with no effort required. The problem is that this circuit operates on a principle of tolerance. The more you stimulate it, the more dopamine gets reabsorbed and recycled, meaning you need increasingly intense stimulation to achieve the same level of pleasure. This is the neurochemical engine of addiction. You keep raising the dose while the return keeps diminishing. Eventually, nothing feels good. You're not depressed in the clinical sense. Your instant reward circuit is simply depleted. Dr. Anna Lemke, a psychiatrist and neuroscientist at Stanford, describes this as the dopamine seesaw. Every spike of dopamine from instant gratification is followed by an equal and opposite dip below your baseline. That dip is experienced as restlessness, emptiness, boredom, and the urge to seek more stimulation. This is why you feel strangely hollow after a 3-hour YouTube binge. More empty than before you started. The dopamine went up and then it came crashing down below where it started, and now you need another hit just to feel normal. But there's a completely different dopamine pathway that operates through the prefrontal cortex, and it works on fundamentally different rules. This dopamine doesn't come from easy pleasure. It comes from earned achievement, from struggling with a difficult problem and finally solving it, from completing a challenging project, from building something that required sustained effort. This is delayed reward dopamine, and critically, it does not trigger the same reabsorption mechanism. It doesn't build tolerance. It doesn't deplete. It accumulates. As this circuit strengthens, thinking itself becomes pleasurable. Challenges become exciting rather than aversive. You begin to seek difficulty the way you once sought ease. This is the neurological foundation of what we call intrinsic motivation, and it's the engine that drives every person who has ever achieved anything of lasting significance. The way to build this circuit is exactly what we've been discussing. Relaxed, sustained engagement with challenging material. Reading difficult books. Solving complex problems. Creating things that push the boundary of your current ability. It feels unrewarding at first because your instant reward circuit is still dominant, still screaming for quick dopamine fixes. But if you persist, if you protect your morning peak hours for this deep work, if you practice relaxed focus, if you resist the pull of your phone, the delayed reward circuit begins to activate and strengthen. And once it does, something shifts. You start wanting to think deeply. You start looking forward to hard problems. The process of growth itself becomes your primary source of satisfaction. This transition doesn't take years. Neuroplasticity works faster than most people realize. Meaningful changes in brain structure and function have been documented in as little as 2 to 8 weeks of consistent practice. The bottom line is this. Your brain is changing every single day, whether you direct that change or not. Every hour you spend passively consuming algorithmic content is an hour your prefrontal cortex spends atrophying. Every hour you spend in relaxed, focused engagement with something difficult is an hour your prefrontal cortex spends getting stronger. The architecture of your brain tomorrow is being determined by the choices you make today. What you do at 9 a.m. matters. What you do at 2 p.m. matters. What you do at 11 p.m. matters. These hours accumulate. They stack. And over weeks and months and years, they build the brain you'll live with for the rest of your life. You don't need to overhaul everything at once. Start with one change. Tomorrow morning, when your alarm goes off, don't reach for your phone. Get up, open the curtains or walk outside, and let sunlight hit your eyes. That's it. That single, small decision, choosing light over a screen in the first minutes of your day, is the first step in redesigning your brain. Everything else builds from there.